computer. All right, folks, thank you so much. So today is June 6th. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Native Calgarian is being recorded on the lands of the Blackfoot, the Niitsitapi. That's the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the opposed US-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Gunai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Wesley, Chiniki, Bearspaw Nations, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit status, and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche, Che Stokomaki. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders and members have been kind to all of us on our Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my name. So today is actually a really important day. We're going to move forward and acknowledge what today is. It's the week after the 215 graves that were discovered in Kamloops, and as a result, the name change has happened finally here in Calgary of the Langevin School. And I wanted to bring our team together and kind of debrief and talk about where they were, how they felt, and especially for the youth that led this specific initiative, how they feel about the entire thing. And our friend Joy is actually going to be leaving us here shortly to be with another commitment. So I'm going to pass the reins over to Joy, and maybe you and I can just have a bit of a discussion here about, where you were and how you found out. And we all met down at the school at 11 that day, and just talk about this experience from your point of view.
Well, it was very, very unexpected. And since I am doing online right now, I was at home when it happened, because my mom came rushing down the stairs and she's like, oh my gosh, I sent you an email. And she was like, she forwarded me what the school had sent her, and I was reading it, and I was so shocked because I just didn't expect it at all. And it was just I was so overwhelmed, but overwhelmed in a good way. Yeah. And it was good.
Right on. So I see you running over to us when we said we would be at the school at 11 to take some interviews. What was that like for you?
That was cool. I didn't expect there to be that many people, and I also didn't expect us to be on national news, which was because when my mom told me, I was like, what? Like national, all over Canada? And people have come up to me, my parents' friends, and oh my gosh, Joy, I saw you on the national, and I heard you on the radio, and I'm like, wow, this is it's so much bigger than I ever thought it was gonna be, and we're getting a lot more attention than I thought we would.
Why do you think that might be, Joy?
I think especially since we're youth leading it. That's people are oh my gosh, there's three little kids doing it, this must be an important thing. And I think you don't see that every day, so people paid a lot more attention.
I think it was really important as a granddaughter, as a niece of some folks that attended Indian residential school. We don't see enough settlers do action, and I think from my point of view, it was really incredible for youth to be this strong about it. And I thought it was important, especially as adults, as the Indigenous community, that you get supported. So I hope in the bigger picture of systemic racism, obviously, this is small beans, but that bigger picture is, how hard it was to get this one thing done. If you had something to say to other settlers, what would it be?
Well, I think you should learn from the people around you, and especially people of color, because there's especially as since I'm a lot younger than people, I haven't gone I didn't recognize how much privilege I had in my life, and I think this has helped me realize that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Joy, and thank you for joining us. I know many people have asked for your time this week, and I really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you real quick, because for just a quick timeline for folks who are listening in who might not be aware, the discovery of the 215 bodies had happened. And we had already, through our art committee, had a previously decided art campaign that we were going to do. And we put it up on Sunday night. And Sunday night, we'd done that work. And then Monday, we did some interviews. And Monday, when we had done the interviews, there were, everybody was wearing their Langevin uniforms except our kids. And our kids were wearing orange. And then the next day, when they finally made that decision, lots of kids were actually wearing orange as well. So I just wanted to ask what your reaction was to the guerrilla art that this committee had gotten done.
I because I didn't actually like participate in the yarn bombing and stuff. But when I got there, it was a lot more moving than I thought it would be. And like my friends have come up with me like, was that you guys? And I was like, yeah, it was like some people in my group, and they're like, whoa, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah, it is.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. And, thank you for sharing everything you did. And if you have to run off, we totally understand. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being a part of this and speaking so well through every single interview you did. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to move it over here a little bit to Seth and Zach, because you both were instrumental in all of this. And maybe we'll back it up a little to the art committee guerrilla art that we had done. What was the reaction to our artwork at school the next day?
Pretty much no. Pretty much just no like bad comments. Like there's no like great job and like that kind of thing. But like a bunch of people did say that, but it was kind of mixed feelings.
There was a lot of whispering kind of going on. You could kind of see fingers pointing and lips moving, and it just kind of brought, I think, attention to what was all going on. And then the next day when they did change the name, suddenly, everybody was, it was everything everybody was talking about. It was big news, and people were kind of happy that it happened.
We had gotten messages through our social media from parents, especially Monday night, saying that their kids were coming home and they were embarrassed and ashamed of their Langevin School uniform. And, we had tried as a committee to work behind the scenes to avoid this moment. And yet the school trustees just were not listening to what we had to say. And it took an international public shaming in order for them to really understand the gravity of this issue. And but you all got it right away, like you just understood it. And I'm so grateful that you did. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Do you want to tell the people who are listening or might be watching what this was like on the Tuesday? How did that go down from your perspective?
Well, the whole like school, we had an online assembly with on a Google Teams, and it was like, and they said it to the whole school, and they shouted out all of our names and all that, and it was I was in awe. Like, did they just change it? Like, what's happening? Like, I couldn't all take it in.
It also felt really like, kind of like Seth said, kind of surreal, because we've been fighting for this for so long, for months on end, and we've been told there's going to be a long process. It's going to take a while. And when this news about the new deaths they found in Kamloops, when that had come out, they had one meeting and boom, they changed the name. And it's kind of shocking and almost a little bit angry that, all it took was one meeting. They could have done this years before, but anyways, it was changed, and it felt really good that it had happened.
I'm so happy to hear that. I wanted to ask you both, what was it like to have so much media on you?
We'd had a few prior interviews before that all happened with CBC and stuff, but they were smaller. And when it actually happened, and when we walked out during lunchtime to see all the different camera crews, it was kind of like, whoa, there's a lot of people that want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And it felt kind of good being the ones to talk to, knowing all about this, and still feeling happy that it happened. But yeah, I felt like Joy said too, how when we learned it went national, it just kind of, well, wait, everybody knows about this now.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about talking to you both about it has always been that you understand the gravity of it. And I think that for me, it's this is a really trauma informed issue, and I think that you have handled yourself with such grace, considering the magnitude of this topic. A lot of folks who have survived or have been impacted are very triggered right now because of all of the non-Indigenous spotlight on something like this, and their narrative, the comments sections. It's been absolutely awful to be Indigenous and going through this. And even the day that we did the guerrilla art, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there at that moment. I questioned whether I should be, because the nation that they had found this from asked for a 4 days of mourning, and none of the national media was respecting any of that whatsoever. And in fact, they were rude, abrasive in a lot of ways, and especially considering the magnitude of this conversation. But I thought you all, and Joy as well, had handled yourself with such grace through this. So, and gave it the respect it deserves, as opposed to some of the reporters and commenters and folks who put in a uninformed opinion. Let's put it that way. So I'm really grateful for you. And Mom, you were there the entire time watching this. How did you find out? And what was your reaction? And how did you feel about pulling the kids out? Like you had supported them wearing orange shirts the day before they had done the rename, the day of the guerrilla art, and then also lots of folks wearing orange on the Tuesday, and especially compared to Monday. So what were your reactions to this, Mom?
It was shock, and I was overjoyed to see the news. Actually, I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for the day when I saw it, and my first instinct was, gotta let the group know, and the kids know, because I didn't know if they were talking about it in the school. So yeah, just overjoyed.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you would all like to add about that entire experience that you just never got a chance to really say to the media?
I know for me, Michelle, like one of the things that's been important as a parent to be talking to the kids about has been that as wonderful as this is, the fact that it took a handful of white kids in our neighborhood to come forward again and again to help bring attention to this is not right. That Indigenous have been speaking out about this forever, and they haven't been afforded the same respect. They haven't been heard in the same way. So yeah, I guess that's just a piece of it that wasn't always represented in the news. And
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. And I can't thank you all for, I know Brian's not with us right now, but you all have been so kind and supportive through this entire process. And it's been months. And, yeah, the CBE had the power to do this so much sooner, chose not to do it until now. So I'm just grateful that you all hung in there and did this work and did the guerrilla art. And I know we are going to talk about next steps later, but right now I thought it was really important that everybody kind of debrief about, what had happened and go from there. So I want to say thank you to your entire family for all your support through this entire process. And as we move to next steps, I just hope this was a really important chapter that we had closed. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mhm.
Such an honor.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Well, I am going to go in alphabetical order according to the participants on the Zoom list and say, Kat, would you mind unmuting yourself and telling us when you found out, how you found out, and go from there?
I believe I found out from Sandra, who sent out an email that said Riverside with exclamation points on it. So I really appreciated getting that. I first felt shock at the speed that it had happened. And then I was relieved that they had finally, the CBE had finally made the change. But overjoyed and excited, I didn't really find that kind of emotion, because I was more disappointed in the CBE that it took national public shaming for them to come to this decision. They didn't do it in the right way. They didn't do it correctly. They didn't change their mindset. They were just forced into it. And there needs to be a lot more work going on by them in the future. And yeah, we can talk about next steps later. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who participated in the guerrilla art action. It was exciting. That was exciting for me. That's kind of what gets me going. You all were so great at it. And I really appreciate the support and the idea. And we're going to continue on with that kind of thing. So I look forward to guiding you or leading you or participating with you in that way too.
For folks that are watching, Kat also runs a settler book club. I run an Indigenous one, but she runs a settler one, so that way you can say your ignorant racist stuff in a circle that I'm not going to punch your face in. Whereas in mine, I will tell you outright if you're being racist and shut you down immediately. So, you know, that, and I think it's really important that eventually everybody get there. But I think, you know, white-centered conversations, Indigenous-centered conversations are just very different conversations. And for folks who are listening and want to be a part of a book club, you know, I run one, Kat runs one, almost everyone here goes to both. There's nothing wrong with going to more than one book club, that's for certain. So, and I'm grateful for that work, because there's also been a lot of discussion on anti-racism, which is Truth and Reconciliation Commission call to action 57 is it's not just Indigenous education, but anti-racism work for public educators or public servants. So folks like the school trustees should be working really hard on anti-racism training, and very clearly are not. So I just want to give that plug and move over to Crystal. And Crystal, ask you, you know, geez, what were things not covered in the media that you wanted to talk about? What were things that you, how did you find out, and some of your reactions, and go from there?
Yeah, so I think I was at work, and so I'd come in on the Monday wearing the orange shirt, and it was nice to see that a number of staff were also doing that, like right off the bat on Monday. So I felt like, okay, there's a little more awareness of what's happening. And then on Tuesday, my AP called me over and said, you have to see this email from our school board. And so, yeah, it's kind of that first reaction of like, oh my gosh, this thing that we've been working on, like was mentioned, that was going to take forever because of all the stalling tactics and all of the problems, is just suddenly that just happened. Mayor Nenshi said he thought they should change this right away at their next meeting, and then they did what he said the next day. And then it was all like, why does it have to happen like this, and how things are being presented in the media, and just that whole, like, I think I wrote online, white supremacy ruins everything. So even like an accomplishment becomes something that re-traumatizes the people who were harmed in the first place every time. To get that emotional reaction, it's like constant that way to get any little bits of change. So yeah, so then that part of it, like trying to mitigate that damage that's happening the best that I could with like online and different things in the media, just the obvious things that I can see they're slowly changing, but you know, they're calling it a discovery, like right away you're like, that's not a discovery, like no. So you can just see the damage that gets done because of the ignorance and like not actually taking the time to learn. So, and then I thought it really shows like the value of the activism in this group. And I didn't really contribute that much to like in concrete terms, but because of all those steps, because of that guerrilla art, I do feel that strongly helped the trustees. Like even if it had come to that level, they could have dismissed it if no one had been doing this work, if there was no petition, if there was no receipts, like we had been putting out the receipts in the media, right? Like we've had these conversations. And I do feel that that all stacked up, plus this national attention and shaming on the national stage, work together. So yeah.
I do want to say that I think you are still a huge contributor. I think, you know, it's important to bring that up, that you supported everybody just as much. So, you know, as through this entire process and brought your ideas and opinions to this committee. So please don't think that you weren't a huge part of it, because you were to us. That's for certain.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. That means a lot to me coming from you, especially.
Oh, absolutely. Right on. Okay, so Heather Walker, if you want to unmute yourself and let us know when you found out, and maybe something that was missed in the media that you wish would have been discussed.
I opened my phone on Tuesday morning to announcements, but of course I'd already heard about Kamloops. So the first thing I did was reply to someone else on my social justice team and saying how it was condescending. And it's just like, no, you this isn't the way it's supposed to go. It was just condescending. I just felt insulted. I'm like, are you kidding? I have never won before, so maybe I don't know how. And I'm like, no, it's still condescending. And so for me, as far as I'm concerned, the conversation isn't over until the school board changes its policy, until we see that. So that was the second thing I did. Congratulations around and whatnot. And the second thing I did was talk to Julie at the school board and find out when the meeting was gonna be. So she's supposed to tell me. Haven't heard yet, but she's supposed to tell me. So Crystal, it's not over yet, right? Like, because you have to live it. Your students have to live it. The city has to live it. It ain't over, you know? So yeah, we have work to do. And for me, it's not over. And so lots of stuff left to do.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Heather, for that. I appreciate that. Jacqueline, do you want to, I know that we can't see you on the YouTube, but that's okay. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and letting us know where you were when you found out and how it felt, and go from there.
Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Yeah, I also found out by getting an email that morning. I think one of the groups sent it out, but I was in a Zoom meeting. And so I was like checking my email out of the corner of my eye and having all these feelings as I was also trying to be in another meeting. But after I was done and I had some time to really fully read all the messages and process, I felt similar to how everyone else felt, of like a real bittersweetness that the CBE Board of Trustees hadn't been more transparent in their process. They hadn't taken the time to be collaborative, to consult with Indigenous, and like really make this process meaningful piece of reconciliation. And I just felt really sad that we still, as settlers, don't have the capacity to do this work, to listen to Indigenous voices without that element of shame. And I really hope moving forward that these institutions can take a different approach, and that our group can be can be instrumental in making that change happen. But I also echo Kat's sentiments that the evening we went and did the yarn bombing and the setting up of the banners and things was a really special evening. It felt very like a culmination of a lot of our work that evening, and I was really grateful to be there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it was a really special night. And, of course, our yard bombing, it was planned long before the discovery of the 215 graves. So it was such a, I don't even know how to describe how awful that moment felt, but it was the first time a lot of us met in person. So that was actually really great to finally meet some of us together, not just on these Hollywood Square Zoom style meetings. So yeah, is there anything else that you've seen in the media that you'd like to counter in some way, shape, or form?
I mean, something that really struck me was our horrifically racist premier's response to it, and his calling of cancel culture as a really ill-informed response. And it really made me think of Adrian Stimson's artist statement that he'd written about the beautiful stencil that he created about how changing the name is about naming your change, and how it's speaking to the larger changes that we want to see. So I'm really inspired by that, and trying to keep that messaging in my heart when I'm having conversations with friends and families about this issue. That's yeah, there's been a lot of conversations this week, so I'm trying to keep that in my heart.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. I appreciate that. And I appreciate finally meeting you in person there and having that conversation. Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and letting us know how you found out, how it felt, and maybe some things in the media that you wish that you could counter.
Sure thing. Thank you. So I guess I was at work and I had kind of been disconnected since that Sunday night. So I was aware, of course, of the 215 discovered, or discovered by scientific standard terms, I guess, in Kamloops. But it was not until the end of the day on Tuesday that I saw an email from someone highlighting the fact that the school name had been changed the day before. And yeah, it was a shock. I could hardly believe it at first, just because of how, for months they had been saying, and I think I'm echoing Crystal here, that for months it wasn't happening. It was not possible for them. And then in the end, probably in a meeting that was surely an hour or less, they were able to do it. So I think I agree that our work set the stage maybe for this to be their response. Otherwise, we would have had another trite response, just like most of the other governments and organizations are giving. That doesn't have any action, despite this renaming being a rather, minor action, but still significant. Not so much in the media, but I was rather disappointed in this email that the school sent out, kind of already giving excuses for why the real name change is going to take months. And I think that's frustrating, very frustrating and telling. In the media, there's just so much colonial phrasing. I apologize for what is probably triggering, but the use of Canadian Indigenous people, or our Indigenous people, or our Canadian land, which is not at all the case, and especially the comments on articles using those types of phrases. And I guess you want to believe that they don't know what they're doing when they say that, but they should. And I guess, yeah, that most of my effort in the last few days has been trying to address those. And I hope that more and more people are doing that, and that it translates into a change in our understanding, a change in our attitudes, and ultimately some action, more action.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well, I found it funny how our group was already moving on before we even like really wrapped this conversation up. And I really agree with how the CBE responded was actually really awful. And I think that there needs, I actually think there should be apologies actually to their level of cavalierness towards Indian residential school survivors. It's just, not only don't they get it, not only did they do this low-hanging fruit because they were publicly shamed into it, but that bigger picture that because they don't get it, they have no problems like just ripping the hearts out of me, my daughter. They've done so publicly already. It's on video. And now in this moment of extreme trauma and grief, still stomping on Indian residential schools and their descendants, like no biggie. So it's so gross. And just a picture, and the media, the way they've handled this entire thing is just so gross and awful. And I just appreciate your understanding of the delicateness of this conversation. And thank you for your hard work during the guerrilla art. And behind the scenes, Jeremy does so much of our tech work, setting up our emails, setting up our files. So, Jeremy, just I hope you know how much we love you and all of the work you've been doing. Everyone that spoke has contributed in ridiculous ways. That's just been so amazing, because I know I just don't have the capacity anymore to do it all. So thank you.
You're welcome, but it's nothing.
Awesome. I'm so humble, this group. Kate and Jen, we're so grateful you could join us here, and especially during video. Awesome to see your faces. So where were you? How did you find out? And, just share what, and I definitely want to hear about the graphics, how it went out, because that was amazing.
Yeah, so I'll start. I was at work, and I was actually on our social media. I was on Twitter, and I saw a few tweets come through that said that the name had been changed, and I was like, "What?" So I went and I went and did a little bit of digging, and I started to make a post right away, and started to make a graphic that I think I said, Langevin School name will be changed. And then I got a text from Kay saying, "Have you checked your email?" And we had an email from the school about 5 minutes before that. So I went through and I actually read it and saw that the name had actually been changed. So I had already posted this graphic, said it will be changed, pulled it all down, made another graphic that said it had been changed. I mean, in that moment, I gotta say, I was elated. Like, I was so proud of us all. I was so proud of Zach and Seth and Joy for their perseverance. It took me a few moments really just to think about how much it had all been to carry, and to think about, even just for me as a settler, the things that we're all carrying in this, but then to realize how much our Indigenous friends are, it's 1,000-fold what you are carrying. So it's been such an emotional journey, that it was almost anticlimactic that it happened, but it was also just, as I said, a huge joy, super proud of us all. And then what are we doing next? What's the next right thing? So yeah, that's how I heard about it.
And I was working. I don't tend to check my personal email. And so another parent, because we have a kid in the school also, texted me and said something about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And that's when I read the email and then texted Jen. And I think Lori had already sent out congratulations to the whole group. And I was like, wow, things can change so fast. And I guess for me, I mean, I've just learned so much from this group. I tend to be sort of a social media warrior. I'm really good at retweeting and not very good about actually coming to meetings. So
being a part of this has been really interesting for me, and seeing other parents in the schools, because I've taken the opportunity to talk to a lot of our kids, friends' parents, and none of them have joined this group, as you guys are aware, but they've all sure reached out now and said how happy they are about the change. And so I find that interesting. And I choose to believe that maybe if something else came up, they might be more willing moving, next time. But there were a lot of people whose first thoughts were, I can't afford new uniforms, and things that are really pragmatic and on a personal level, versus the, okay, but what does this do on the bigger level? So it's been interesting. And yeah, I'm really excited about it and a little bit intimidated by all the things you guys are planning to do next. So
you and me both. Holy.
yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And one other thing I want to ask you, because you both really do pay attention to Twitter. There's a few of us in the crowd here that are just like ridiculously on Twitter. And I wanted to ask you, you're from what you've seen out from, mainstream media and then social media, were there things that you thought were missed about this conversation that you wish you had seen or that you wish got out?
I'm afraid I won't put this nearly as well as everybody before us have. But it just feels so wrong for this to be an answer to something as devastating as 215 people.
Yeah.
And it just feels like Twitter went straight to, this is fantastic and a great answer. And it was like, no, this isn't an answer. This should have been done because it was like, because Indigenous voices are saying it should be done. I just really was struck, Michelle, by your comments around, we shouldn't have to do a petition. That is not how this should work. And it felt a bit like that to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I was thinking back to when I made our logo, and our logo is grounded in the colors of the 4 directions, and then the orange for Every Child Matters. And I wanted to make sure that it sort of had a rip in it, like it looked unfinished. And it did feel like Twitter was feeling like the story is now finished, or the work is done. And I took myself back to the creation of that logo again and just thought about how it's so not done. It's unfortunately, we will uncover far more bodies, and there's much more grief to carry, and there's much more work to be done. So I think I echo what Kay says, that the Twitter seemed to just sort of wrap it up in a bow, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you both so much, and for your work on the graphics and all of the understanding, again, coming to this table, understanding the trauma and gravity of this issue and not trying to, belittle it in any capacity, because it's just so ridiculous. I feel like the media and regular public are way over here in this conversation, and we're way over here. And our residential school survivors and their descendants aren't even having this conversation because they're really traumatized and triggered right now. And Canadian society and mainstream media just wants to take a baseball bat to their heart and keep pushing it around. So I'm really grateful that everyone gets this. So thank you. Larry, would you mind unmuting and telling us where you were when you found out, and what was it like for you? And and maybe some things that you've seen in the media that you wish wasn't there.
Well, I was working at a school as I do part-time, and I monitor social media for that school. So it was pretty quick to see the Facebook post. And I honestly, I'd love to give credit to whoever posted it first. I'm there. I saw it so many times. It was a nice screenshot of an email that went to the parents. And my first response was a gasp. I actually gasped, right? And then it went to anger, and my whole day I was very angry. This is 8.5 years for me. My son's 20, and I sent him a message. I'm getting emotional, and he said, "It's about time, and that it took not only the bodies, and I felt it coming the day before. I felt it coming the day before. I felt there was a bandwagon. Many friends of mine who have seen my tweets and ignored them for 8.5 years were jumping on my bandwagon, and it hurt because they weren't on my bandwagon in 2017 and in 2015. I look back at my old tweets, one retweet and one heart, and I'll give you a guess. The person you're seeing on the screen right now was the one person. And so, yeah, I was very angry that day when I should have been celebratory. And the reason I was angry and not celebratory, because it was nothing I did. It was nothing that Michelle did. It was nothing that the group did. It took the mayor to push them over the edge. They didn't listen to their students. I thought about Zach, Seth, and Joy. You know, their students were telling them. They're people that had to wear that name on their shirt were telling them. And that wasn't enough. And there are people there that I call my friends that I'm very, very disappointed in. And so I had all of that on that day, all of that anger filling me in. At times I was wondering why I wasn't more celebratory, and could I be more celebratory? And I'm really pleased to hear most of you talk about that. It starts with joy, it starts with excitement, it starts with we did it. And you guys deserve every little bit of that joy. You did a lot of hard work, and you did set the table for the mayor to say what he needed to say. But you all know it took 215 bodies and a mayor to push this group over the edge. The only positive thing I can say about the whole thing is that I really think the bandwagon filled up, and some people will jump off of it, but I'm seeing more people trying to stay on it. I've taken this as an opportunity to promote Michelle's book club a lot more and reference the 215, and to say, if that affected you as it affected me, and you want to do more work on reconciliation, join this book club. And I really hope that over the next few months, we grow those numbers, and there's lots of work to be done. And I think lastly, and I mentioned it via email, but I'll mention it again, we can't lose sight of the fact that this policy, this renaming policy, needs some really, really strong critical eyes. We can't trust that this is going to be inclusive, that it's going to be transparent, and that it's going to be a good policy. So I would suggest we all be very, very mindful and to take a close look at that policy and say what we need to say when we need to say it. And the last thing, in terms of media, I laughed out loud when I watched City TV say the CBE quickly decided. I just thought that was a really, really funny phrase. After 8.5 years, they quickly decided. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think now is a really good time, though, to talk about Larry Leach's son, Rory, because Rory did attend, and it was Larry and Rory that uncovered who Langevin was. And when Larry said, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And I'm like, name's familiar, but I can't remember offhand. And he told me, and it was from that point on we were constantly talking about it, and celebratory when Langevin Block was changed, and when they finally changed Langevin Bridge, that was important. But now here we are with the school, how hurtful and awful it feels. 2 years ago, 400 letters that went to the school board trustees that they disregarded. So when you talk about the dismissal of the voices and the audacity for anyone to use the word quickly when talking about this, and after a public shaming internationally, then by our own mayor, only then was it done. I think it's really important to note all of that. And I'm grateful that you and Rory started this at 8.5 years ago. And I'm grateful we're here today. But I'm just so disappointed because we have tens of thousands of more graves to uncover across this country. And where every time this happens, the trauma is going to be resurfaced again for anyone who's Indigenous and affected by this policy. And that's not to discount how Canadians feel being complicit in genocide in some capacity and covering it up. So, you know, there's a lot there, and I just really appreciate you and Rory, and want to make that excellent shout out to you both for the impetus of all of this.
One quick note I forgot, Michelle. Sorry
Yeah,
to
please.
interrupt.
No.
I believe it was Zach who was quoted on TV saying, "I can't imagine what it would be like being an Indigenous student walking into that school." I said that years ago to trustees, to the former principal, and just nothing back. And it was really nice to hear those words. So thanks, buddy.
Right on. He's finding the unmute. Here we go.
That was actually Joy, I think, that said that.
I think it was you. I'm giving you credit.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. Miriam, would you like to unmute yourself and tell us where you were when you found out, and go from there?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it was one of the heaviest weeks in my latest years, because I didn't find out right away, because my son came over to talk to me and tell me that he had just been diagnosed with cancer. Anyway, he's in the hospital now. He had his surgery, and he's even on his Twitter today, and sent me an email, and being concerned about this whole matter. And of course, the other thing is the learning about the 215 children. I don't think the other people in the group know that I have an Indigenous daughter, and she's gone through a lot, and I haven't had a chance to talk about all that with her. I just know that she is in a lot of turmoil, and because she didn't even know that she was Indigenous. The Ontario government didn't even bother telling us for 44 years. So of course she was more assimilated into the white person's world. So this was my, one of my big awakenings about the whole thing. But I did see the email that somebody, one of the people sent out, and I thought, well, I sent right away my response and saying it's terrible. It had to be this tragedy, this horrific tragedy, before some action was taken. I didn't know it was 8 years. I thought it was only 4, and that's long enough. But anyway, and I'm not very, I don't know what you'd say, technically savvy. So since COVID, I haven't been able to do a lot, except have my voice out there and talk to my friends. And I even, one woman that was really clueless, and she was, the typical settler person. I've actually been able to educate her, and she even, is much more aware now about racism and the Indigenous people. So even one person makes a difference. And so I'm better, as I say, person to person with that. And I've been, of course, watching the media, and as you say, the usual conversations. The only good thing they've brought up is having Murray Sinclair on making, and Cindy Blackstock and a few people like that to drive home the message. But of course, it's going to take a lot of grieving to really do things. And I'm still in utter shock by the racism of the school board, the trustees. But it unfortunately is typical. It's what we're facing. And I can only say I'm glad the group as a whole is willing to go on and do more. And I'll do what I can, my little bit of, to contribute to it, because I just think, you're wonderful people. And I think having Joy, Seth, and Zach on this, it gives me a lot of hope for the future, for, having young people like you around is just so encouraging. So I'd like to end on a positive note.
You're such a rock star, Miriam. First, I'm really sorry to hear about your son having cancer. I saw us all kind of just clench our hearts right away with love and support for you. But I want to add one more thing. Miriam and I are very much Palestinian advocates, and because of there were so many things that happened at once, but we were also united with the Palestinians. And you were a Jewish nurse that actually served some time in Palestine. So, your voice matters so much, and especially when it comes to this issue as well. And I just can't thank you enough for always being here and supporting us and being part of the book club and being in my life since I don't know more. And I just, I'm grateful for you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on the media as well. I appreciate that. Rosemary, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and telling us where you were, how you felt, and some other things, we'll go from there.
I was on the phone with you, Michelle. That's how I found out. I found out from you first thing on Tuesday morning. And yeah, I mean, it felt unbelievable that it had happened. After, like Larry, a lot of anger that they could have done this much sooner, that as everyone has said, that it was done in response to the children who were found at Kamloops. And so it's hard to maintain a sense of happiness or celebration because of the weight and the grief, or the weight of the pain and the grief that has gone along with finding the 215 bodies, and knowing, because of your book club, because you've taken us methodically through the calls of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that there will be more bodies across the country. And we studied the calls around missing children and burial information. And I actually, a big question is always, well, what is the government doing? And I actually wrote a letter to them saying, have you say you're moving on these issues, you've put some money in, and that you're talking. I said, but have you reached out to Treaty 7? And I finally, after about 2 months, got a response saying, no, we haven't engaged in conversations yet with Treaty 7. So I question who it is they've been talking to all across the country. I didn't follow a lot of media coverage, but one thing that annoyed me was Kenny. He comes out with this announcement, there'll be money to put, for research into, finding more bodies here. And I'm going, okay, but what about the Indigenous children who are living and who go to our schools under a curriculum that does not serve them well? And what about this new curriculum you're proposing that's going to make the situation even worse? We have a government that doesn't want us to know about what happened at residential schools. They don't want us to build relationships. They don't want us to have reconciliation, because you know what? That's when people would finally get it, when it comes to the land and its resources, and people would stand up to a government that is so hell-bent on propping up a dying industry that can, and that, I mean, it's, Cindy Blackstock, I think, was just brilliant on the radio when she said, how can you be talking about reconciliation? How can you apologize for this when you still move ahead with all of this resource extraction? So I just think those are things to keep in mind. What it did do, though, was I felt so energized for the first day or two in terms of, we have to keep moving. And you all needed to calm me down. We need time for reflection and to debrief, and you're right. And yet I'm still, I have spent time reaching out to some Indigenous friends and colleagues, and that's reinforced this sense of the weight of the pain that people have been feeling. One or two have been residential school survivors, or have been in foster care, and it's just so heavy. It's so heavy. And so we always have to keep that in mind, as we continue with this work. So I totally agree with Larry. We have to be on top of that policy. We have to be prepared to have input and talk about what we feel needs to be in such a policy. And luckily, we've already done a lot of research across the country and in the US, especially San Francisco, to see what they've put together. And we need to be looking at that material and promoting it. And we have a workshop coming up on Thursday, June 24th, which is talking about making visible our shared history, the context for renaming institutions, because it should be a no-brainer for people at this point as to why we need to do that. And as you said, Michelle, it's low-hanging fruit. The issues are so much deeper. We have so much further to go. And I really want to thank Joy, Seth, Zach, and their families for putting in the effort that they did to galvanize this particular campaign and all of us. You're incredible. Thank you. And everybody, you're all incredible. Thank you.
Rosemary put in one of the first anti-racism policies to the CBE years ago that never got fully realized. And Rosemary, I'm so grateful to walk this journey with you through my book club, through all the activism. I'm just so grateful. I can't thank you enough. Sarah Flynn, I invite you to unmute and tell us where you were when you first found out. And
I was at home, and actually my husband he texted me. He was on it before I was, and he texted me, and like everyone, people here have really enunciated the range of and progression of emotions just well, shock, joy, delight, anger, rage, frustration, beating my head against the brick wall a little bit. I pretty participated in some of the social media goading in between the time that the discovery was made public and before the mayor or the school board had taken any action. And because of that, I think I foresaw this pathway was going to happen exactly the way it did. And so I'm getting cynical in my dotage, I won't lie, but I felt a lot of kind of like, oh yeah, this is pretty predictable. And I would like, we're going to keep going. It's been an honor working with you guys. As always, I just keep learning. I'm amazed how much more there is to learn, and looking forward to moving on and I want to keep on that school board. I want to just hammer that school board. That's kind of like becoming my passion, is I just want to take them down. So anyway, thank you all. You're all amazing. It's really been a pleasure. And I shouldn't say it's been, because we are still a group. We have changed our name and we are ready to roll.
Love it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all of those words. It's exactly, I think we all have that sentiment. And I, again, front lines on the Wet'suwet'en issue, in front of TC, you and I we're trying to talk about these things and so the bigger pictures of systemic racism all the time. So I'm so grateful you're on this path with us. So thank you. And Shelley, I invite you to unmute yourself and tell us about your experience through this.
I'll just preface this that being autistic, I process emotions differently. So what happened with me was my first words was, you got to be F kidding me. Because I'm like, just what we have gone through. And I've got a lot of stuff going on and outside of what's going on. And so I'm really emotional and this has hit me. It hit me in this, like, I'm not comparable to any Indigenous person on how it's happened with it. What hit me was, this is not new. We knew Harper said in 2009, he apologized, the Truth and Reconciliation, the 213 calls. And I was telling everybody, this is not new and that we should be doing better. Settlers should be doing better. And it just, okay, yes, I jumped on the bandwagon in 2016 when Trump got elected. And I've been posting about all human rights because since 2016, because sorry if I'm preachy, this is like my special interest. You can't pick and choose your human rights. And that's what I'm seeing some people on my Facebook feeds. And I am hiding them because or deleting them. I just can't. Because they've jumped on this bandwagon, which I have very mixed feelings about. So I've been just blasting all sorts of human rights stuff. With Palestine, I've hid my aunt because I just don't have the energy to talk about, because she's very pro-Israeli. Don't have the. Sorry, that's off topic. I just don't have the energy. But I've been just blasting. Every time I see something that resonates, I just share. I tag people in it, and just to keep going, because we got to keep going. We can't stop, because this is, like Michelle said, low-hanging fruit. And I always bring up the disability perspective because Indigenous people have disabilities too, and they're even a little bit more marginalized. So I'll always fight for them. And I always just keep bringing, let's talk about the disability perspective, because that's just me. I just want to keep fighting because, I was at an Amnesty AGM this weekend, and it was on an Indigenous training, and it was two ladies, one from the States, but both Indigenous, and we were in breakout rooms, and I said, people need to start putting settlers need to start putting their money where their mouth is, and support Indigenous causes like Inspire, and start promoting positive things of the Indigenous community. I said to Amnesty Internet, and went back into the big group, and somebody said, we said you need to put your money where your mouth is. I'm like,
Yes, right on. Shelley, thank you. And I appreciate your, perspective, because as an able-bodied person, I sometimes miss this obvious. And I'm so grateful you're here, you support us, that you're in this group, that you bring your voice to the table, and that we try really hard to incorporate it. So thank you, Shelley.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That means so much. And one of the books that we read in Kat's book club last week said that the colonizer has, because of the change in the country food and everything, has made Indigenous people sicker. And that makes sense. So that's, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm grateful. So I am going to tell everybody a huge thank you. I'm going to put this out on YouTube immediately. It will probably be a podcast a little later, and I'm just grateful everybody gave a quick debrief. So thank you so much.